Hello, everyone. This is Tim from Team Terra, and today I have something super special to bring you. Right, so we have come into possession of some very special pictures. These are some pictures just barely released from an excavation in the nation of Cookgypt. Now, I know that some of you may not have heard of Cookgypt much in the past, but Cookgypt was a nation far in the north of what is modern-day Russia. And because they were so far in the north of modern-day Russia, they really didn't have much food or really good food. And so what they did was they became very focused on making high quality food, right? And so they formed their entire nation and their entire culture around cooking. And so some of these pictures are very symbolic of that, because we have found one of the most famous pharaohs ever to live, and his name is Blenderkotep the Emulsifier. All right, let's get started, because this is some super cool symbolism. Let's start here with the ladle and the whisk. And so the ladle, number one, represents leading the people in cooking really, really good food, right? Because what do you do with a ladle? You try food and you test it out, right? And if you're willing to eat your own food and try it, that means that it is really good food. And so from this, we can see that Pharaoh's biggest job was to cook just amazingly good food, just awesome food. They're supposed to be the chef examples for the whole nation. On the other side, once again, we have this whisk. And what do you do with the whisk? You mix things and you beat things. And so this was representative of two more of the Pharaoh's duties in Cookgypt. He was to mix the people together, because when you get mixing people, you get mixing ideas, and you get way, way better food. And at the same time, there was, to modern day ears, a somewhat disturbing trend of beating chefs who didn't do well, and you beat things with a whisk. So pharaohs needed to be able to lay down the law and beat chefs that didn't do really well. Now, I apologize. I've been saying pharaoh the whole time. Their actual title was chef pharaoh, and which is a slight change. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's look at this crown, because this crown is just fascinating. So cool. I've got another picture down here. So here's a side view of the crown. That's just awesome. All right, so first of all, you can tell that this crown is made from three distinct parts. It's got a mixing bowl, it's got parchment paper, and it's got a salt shaker. To begin with, let's start with the salt shaker right up here. Salt was like a universal spice, right? All across the world, people use salt in everything, but nowhere was it more prized than in Cookgypt, and especially by the chef pharaohs. It's rumored that chef pharaohs actually originally made their fortunes, and the first chef pharaoh became chef pharaoh because of how much salt he had and the empire that he built from that salt trade. Let's move on to the mixing bowl and the parchment paper. So you can see a mixing bowl sticking up out of the top here. And so the mixing bowl, that represented the mixing kingdom. People don't usually know this, but Cookgypt was actually split into two kingdoms in the middle of its heyday, and it split into the mixing kingdom and into the baking kingdom. The mixers were tired because they felt like the bakers were elitist and like looking down on them, and so they split off into their own kingdom entirely. And so that's why Blenderkotep is so special. This is so cool that we have finally found his grave, is because the reason why he's called Blenderkotep the Emulsifier is because he managed to bring these two nations back together. It's actually a curious fact of Cookgypt. We're not quite sure how the baking kingdom survived without the mixers, because they thought that mixing was an inferior art, and so they actually wouldn't mix any of their foods. But how you can bake something without first mixing it is still a mystery to today. Hopefully something in this crypt will be able to help us with that. Anyway, back to Blenderkotep the Emulsifier. He managed to bring these two kingdoms back together, and the way that he did it was he actually created the perfect KitchenAid mixing bowl. And now we still don't have this today. We haven't found one. We don't know where it went. But we are pretty sure that its form looked something like this, which is why it's part of his crown, right? And it's made in such a way that you can stick things in and you can mix it and you can get everything and you don't have to worry about it. It's just the smoothest mixing experience you've ever seen. I'm very sad that we don't have that today, because it would be very, very nice. Anyway, so mixing bowl represents the mixing kingdom. The parchment paper represents the baking kingdom, and those were the two kingdoms that Blenderkotep the Emulsifier brought together. Here's another interesting thing. So we don't really have good pictures of this. They are kind of hidden. But on his throne, Blender Cookgypt has these oven mitts. And what we really don't know much about these because they haven't been found in many other crypts that we have seen. But we think that their symbolism is something to do with being able to hold a hot and an intense situation together, right? Which is something that, once again, Blender Cookgypt was very, very good at, right? He brought these two competing nations back together, and there was a lot of anger and a lot of distrust, but he managed to do it. And so the oven mitt is a perfect example of what Blender Cookgypt did. Let's scroll down to a couple more things. So here's a more frontal view of the crown, and then the ladle and whisk once again. Now, here's some fascinating thing about Cookgypt. So as compared to a lot of traditional ideas of heaven and hell, Cookgypt is, they thought that when you died, you were transferred to an eternal cooking show. And, you were judged eternally and you got rewards or benefits based on how well you did in this cooking show. And so obviously, chef pharaohs needed to bring their most prized implements into this afterlife, into this cooking show, so that they could do the best possible in the cooking show. And this knife set, while it's kind of rusted and destroyed now, it would have been an amazingly sharp, amazingly well taken care of knife set for the day. And that's why Blender Cookgypt is taking this with him into the afterlife. Second thing is a blender. And blenders actually also had huge symbolic meaning in Cookgypt. They represented both thoroughness and efficiency, because number one, you wanted to be very, very thorough when making food. You wanted to make sure that all the food was cooked in the right way and done correctly to make just the best meals. But you also needed to do it efficiently, right? Because good food can sometimes take time. But luckily, Cookgyptians knew this, and so they also valued efficiency. They thought that if food was better, the faster that you could make it, while not sacrificing quality. So that's why a blender was just a massive symbol in Cookgypt. You would actually see it on a lot of different storefronts, and there were blender awards that were given out and whatnot. So massive symbol right there, and very logical that Blender Cookgypt would bring his blender into the afterlife. This last one's actually kind of curious, because Blender Cookgypt right here, we can see that he's bringing his toaster oven. We are not quite sure what this is, not quite sure what the symbolism is, but we think that it might be something to do with the fact that he was actually born in the baking kingdom, right? So he was born in the time when the bakers and the mixers were separated, but he was born in the baking kingdom. And so he would probably want to bring this as like a sign of his heritage, maybe to make some comfort food with. But yeah, this one is curious, and be sure to pay attention for more information on this. Anyway, that is the end of all of these pictures that we have. Absolutely fascinating stuff. I'm so glad that we got these pictures. They're actually pretty exclusive right now. So we at Team Terra were super grateful to get these from the people who are excavating. Anyway, glad you guys can join us. Hope that this made a difference. Hope that you learned something from this. Very, very fun stuff. Anyway, like this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and have a wonderful rest of your day.